Are your houseplants struggling to reach their full potential? If you've ever wondered how to get that lush, vertical growth for your indoor plants, then look no further. Today, we're diving into the magic of moss poles. A simple yet powerful tool, moss poles help your climbing plants reach new heights, providing the support they need to thrive. Whether you have Monstera, Philodendron, or Pothos, a moss pole can be the game changer your plants are craving. In this video, I'll show you step by step how to make your own DIY moss pole with affordable materials, boosting your plant's growth while keeping your home looking fresh and green. Let's get started with the basics. Why do plants need moss poles? Climbing plants in nature latch onto trees and other structures as they grow, using their aerial roots to cling to surfaces. Indoors, without this natural support system, plants tend to sprawl out, grow in a leggy manner, or simply not grow to their full potential. A moss pole mimics the natural environment, offering a vertical surface for your plants to climb. But it's more than just support. Moss poles provide moisture to the plant's aerial roots, encouraging faster and more vigorous growth. So, if you want to see your plants grow big, bold, and healthy, keep watching as I show you how to create your own moss pole, perfect for any indoor plant lover. Section 1. Gathering your materials. Before we jump into crafting, let's go over what you'll need for this DIY moss pole project. The best part: you likely have most of these items at home, and anything you don't have is easily found at your local garden center or online. Here's what you'll need: sphagnum moss. This is the key ingredient for any moss pole. Sphagnum moss retains moisture, which is crucial for supporting aerial roots. It's lightweight, easy to work with, and available at most garden supply stores. PVC pipe, bamboo stake, or wooden dowel. You'll need a sturdy pole for your moss to wrap around. PVC pipe is great because it's durable, lightweight, and water-resistant. However, bamboo or a wooden dowel works just as well if you're looking for a more natural aesthetic. Plastic netting or twine. You'll need something to secure the moss to the pole. Plastic mesh netting works beautifully, as it holds the moss in place while still allowing the plant's roots to penetrate. Alternatively, twine or gardening wire can be used if you prefer. Scissors, for trimming the netting and moss. Spray bottle or water source, to moisten the moss before assembling your pole. Gloves, optional, but helpful if you want to keep your hands clean while working with wet moss. Once you've gathered your materials, it's time to prep and get hands-on with building your moss pole. Section 2. Preparing your moss. Now that you've got your materials, let's start with preparing the moss. Sphagnum moss typically comes dry in bags, and you'll need to rehydrate it before using it in your moss pole. Hydrated moss will be easier to mold around your pole, and more importantly, it will provide the moisture your plant needs to encourage root growth. To rehydrate your moss, follow these simple steps. Grab a large container or bowl and place the dry sphagnum moss inside. Slowly pour water over the moss, ensuring it's fully submerged. Let the moss sit for about 10-15 minutes. You'll notice it begins to plump up as it absorbs water. After it's soaked, take handfuls of the moss and gently squeeze out the excess water. You want the moss to be damp but not soaking wet. Your moss is now ready to go. The moisture it holds will help mimic the humid conditions that tropical plants crave, which is essential for their aerial roots to latch on and grow. Section 3. Building your moss pole. Now for the fun part, assembling the moss pole itself. This part is much easier than you might think, and the end result will be a sturdy, functional support for your climbing plants. Here's a step-by-step guide. Start with your chosen pole: PVC pipe, bamboo stake, or wooden dowel. If you're using PVC pipe, you may want to cut it to the desired length before you start. For most plants, a length of around 3-4 feet is ideal, but you can adjust depending on the size of your plant and the space available. Next, Take your pre-soaked moss and begin wrapping it around the pole. Start at the bottom and work your way up, layering the moss as you go. Don't worry about being too precise. You want the moss to cover the pole, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Once you've covered the pole in moss, use the plastic netting or twine to secure it. If you're using netting, cut a piece that's long enough to wrap around the moss-covered pole. Start at the bottom, wrapping the netting tightly around the pole and securing it with zip ties or garden wire as you go. This will hold the moss in place and keep it from unraveling over time. If you're using twine or wire, simply wrap it around the moss-covered pole in a spiral pattern, securing the moss as you move up the pole. The key here is to make sure the moss is held snugly against the pole, but not so tightly that it restricts the plant's roots from penetrating the moss. Once you reach the top of the pole, trim any excess netting or twine, and make sure the moss is evenly distributed. And there you have it, your very own DIY moss pole. But we're not done yet. The next step is incorporating the moss pole into your plant's environment and ensuring it helps your plant grow to its full potential. Section 4. Installing the moss pole. Now that your moss pole is ready, it's time to introduce it to your plant. This step is crucial, as proper installation will ensure your plant gets the most benefit from the moss pole. Here's how to install it. Gently remove your plant from its current pot. Be careful not to disturb the roots too much, especially if it's already attached to a previous support. Position the moss pole in the center of the pot or slightly toward the back, depending on the arrangement you prefer. Make sure it's pushed deep enough into the soil to be stable. Around 3-4 inches should do the trick. Repot your plant around the moss pole, ensuring that the plant's main stem is close to the pole. As you add soil back into the pot, press it down gently to secure both the plant and the moss pole in place. Now comes the crucial part: attaching your plant to the moss pole. Using plant ties, string, or garden wire, carefully tie the stems or vines to the moss pole. Don't tie them too tightly, as you don't want to damage the plant, but make sure the ties are secure enough to keep the plant in place. As the plant grows, it will naturally start to send out aerial roots that latch onto the moss pole. These roots will absorb moisture from the moss, helping the plant to grow stronger and faster. Section 5. Maintaining your moss pole. A moss pole is not a set-it-and-forget-it solution. It requires a bit of care and maintenance to ensure it stays effective and beneficial for your plant. Here are some tips to keep your moss pole in top shape. Moisture. The key to a successful moss pole is moisture. Your plant's aerial roots will only benefit from the moss pole if it stays damp. Use a spray bottle to mist the moss pole regularly, ensuring it stays hydrated. Depending on the humidity in your home, you may need to mist it every few days or even daily. Pruning. As your plant grows, you'll need to guide its stems and vines along the moss pole. Regularly check the ties and adjust them as needed, especially as new growth emerges. You may also need to prune back some of the longer vines to encourage fuller growth. Repotting. Over time, your plant will outgrow its pot and will need to be repotted. When this happens, carefully remove the moss pole and repot both the plant and the pole into a larger container. Replacing the moss. Over time, the moss may start to degrade, especially if it's been in constant contact with water. If the moss starts to break down or mold, it's time to replace it. Simply remove the old moss, wrap fresh moss around the pole, and re-secure it with netting or twine. Section 6. Tips for encouraging growth. Now that your moss pole is in place, let's talk about how to encourage your plant to grow even faster and healthier. While the moss pole provides essential support and moisture, there are a few additional steps you can take to boost your plant's growth even further. Lighting. Most climbing plants that benefit from moss poles, like Monstera and Philodendron, thrive in bright, indirect light. Make sure your plant is getting enough light to fuel its growth. If natural light is limited, consider supplementing with a grow light. Fertilizing. To encourage lush, healthy growth, Feed your plant with a balanced, water-soluble fertilizer every few weeks during the growing season.